Squeeze me, it says.
Broncos country, let's rock.
Oh, that's cute. Welcome to That's Good Sports. I'm Brandon Perna, and I hope you had as nice of a Christmas as Richard Sherman, who just a year ago tried to, assault his family. Good to see he keeps getting rewarded with the sweetest gifts.
Broncos country, let's rock.
Now, my Christmas as a Broncos fan was terrible, but maybe my team will be relevant again by 2030. I am a day late with the best and worst plays, players, games, and moments, so let me not waste any more of your time. It's the most important NFL award show on the internet. Let's start right away with hardest hit.
Here's another one, watch out!
This is going to Chargers safety Derwin James, who torpedoed towards Ashton Dulin, forcing both guys into concussion protocol and ultimately also getting ejected for this helmet-to-helmet hit. Now, I don't think I agree with the ejection, which is sort of a moot point since, both guys would have been in concussion protocol, would have kept James out anyway, but what he shouldn't be doing is leading with his head. I think he was aiming for the shoulder, but James is using his head like Brandon Staley tackling analytics. Speaking of best cat-cow pose, Brandon Staley, laugh all you want, but if you got a fucked up lower back, you know how necessary this yoga stretch is. Now, the Chargers clinched a postseason berth, which is the first time we've talked about the Chargers and berth since Rivers was still there shooting kids out his urethra every year like those slime cannons on Nickelodeon. Congratulations, Chargers. Now go into the postseason and bounce the Chiefs, and you will have my respect. Best quarterback? Had Gardner Minshew got the win, this would have been his category to lose. He could have thrown one touchdown for 5 yards in a victory, and he would have gotten the award. But I'll give it to his opponent, one Dak Prescott. Now, Baker Mayfield won the MVP, and I already recapped that game in the new worst ever, so you can check it if you want. Prescott was sacked 6 times by the geriatric Eagles front, but he exploited their secondary like I have yet to see this season. The most passing yards Philly gave up this year was surprisingly to the Cardinals back in Week 5 with 239. Dak torched them to the tune of 347 yards, so more than 100 more than their worst outing this year, with 2 of those touchdown passes going to this CD never skips, and I am the lamb leading you to the slaughter. The game really didn't mean much for the Eagles, and it showed. On defense, anyway. Dak's most impressive throw came on a 3rd and 30 deep ball to T.Y. Hilton, who, yes, does indeed play for the Cowboys. Not even sure who needs Odell Beckham at this point, unless he can play corner for the Cowboys. The boys erased an early 10-point deficit to hand Philly their 2nd loss of the season. Best robbing of charity no longer belongs to Brett Favre. Get the hell out of the way, Brett. There's a new swindler in town, and his name is Devontae Smith, who did indeed put on a mask and rob the Salvation Army bucket for everything it had. Today's episode is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Right now, the gauntlet is open for drafting on Underdog. This is a draft for the NFL playoffs, all right? It's a $25 entry fee, best ball format, meaning only your highest scoring players are used every week, and there's $1 million in prizes with $100,000 going to first place. All you gotta do is click my link below, use my code THATSGOOD, and draft your team before the playoffs start. This is not daily fantasy, these are fantasy drafts for the playoffs. Only place you can do it with my code UNDERDOG. Will match your first deposit up to $100. This will be my first time playing in the gauntlet, and I'm pretty excited to draft players heading into the playoffs because we have no idea how that will shake out, which I think somehow helps me. You have to think about players who are going to score a lot and who are on teams that won't get bounced. As usual, I have a link for this week's fantasy draft, week 17, where you can play against me in a 10-person league. Check it. Worst quarterback? Well, I thought this was, without question, going to be Russell Wilson, but then Nick Foles happened on Monday Night Football. This was a crazy week with a lot of bad quarterback play as 4 quarterbacks each tossed 3 interceptions. Tua, Russ, Derek Carr, and of course Nick Foles. So they can all share the award as I montage their picks to this choice stock music. And to make this pickocalypse perfect, I give you the Bears with the worst for bringing in poor Nathan Peterman for a Hail Mary attempt just so he could throw one more interception. Also, Zach Wilson, who was benched all the way back on Thursday, has been demoted to the inactive list. He's benched possibly for the rest of the season, and Mike White has been cleared to play. He found that 11th doctor. Mike White's season is back. Best individual performance? Well, this week's BIP goes to tight end George Kittle, my tittle, baby, who for the second week in a row had 2 touchdown grabs and a 49ers win. Kittle racked up 120 yards, tied with CeeDee Lamb for 4th most, but Kittle did it on 4 fewer receptions at 6 catches, and the Niners' big win over Washington, making life very easy on young Brock Purdy. The Niners now have moved on to 10-4 and are locked solid at the top of the playoff standings. Kittle, Tyler Higbee, and TJ Hawkinson all had 2 touchdown grabs this weekend. Solid outing for the tight ends. Worst stat? Also from this game, going to Taylor Heineke, who was benched in favor of Carson Wentz in a game where both QBs had a passer rating well over 100 and still lost by 17 points. Heineke had a pick and a fumble, but I never like when a guy gets replaced by Wentz. Another worst stat, the Giants and Commanders both lost, but kept their playoff seeding since the Lions and the Seahawks also lost. Now, Glock Purdy has been incredibly solid as a Brock, and what impressed me by this victory is he succeeded without throwing the ball much to Christian McCaffrey, just 2 passes to McCaffrey, who also only had 46 rushing yards, so he's doing it with everyone. Best defense? Well, I think I'm going to give the nod to the Steelers, who held Derek Carr to 174 passing yards and forced him to throw 3 picks. And they did it all without TJ Watt notching a sack. Cam Hayward and Alex Highsmith dropped Carr 3 times, and most impressively, their secondary only gave up 2 receptions for 15 yards to Devontae Adams. And because the NFL is weird as hell, this year, the Steelers leapfrogged the Raiders in the playoff race and can still get in. Now, don't ask me how, because I was too lazy to look it up. This game, though, had the best moment. On the evening of Christmas Eve, the Steelers came back and beat the Raiders with a late touchdown pass to George Pickens, scoring just as many points as they needed to beat those same Raiders 5 decades ago. What a nice tribute. Worst QB in a win? Well, that's going to old Andy Dalton in what had to be the real worst game of the week between the Browns and Saints. The Browns fell to NOLA 17-10, but Dalton failed to crack the 100-yard passing mark and threw a pick. Watson completed fewer than half of his passes for just 135 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 pick. He did run for a touchdown, but who really gives a shit? Honestly, no one even watched this game. Best defender, though, goes to Dirty Danchez picking off Deshaun Watson, and I think you know why that's noteworthy. Worst defense? The Lions' run D.
Some of your best work is when you get your face kicked in. And so, I mean, that literally, I don't know, everybody gets their face kicked in, but
the Lions got diced up by the Panthers' rushing attack that gives me hope. Carolina can indeed defeat the Buccaneers this weekend. Dante Foreman, Chuba Hubbard combined for 290 yards on the ground. Sam Darnold and Raheem Blackshear, very cool name, even pitched in with a couple short rushing tuds. Ultimately, Darnold only had to throw the ball 22 times because the Panthers ran the ball 43 times in their 14-point win over the Lions. Best offense is probably the Rams, but again, I already did that game, so the Bills. It's the Bills. Buffalo blew out the Bears That's no surprise, but for the first time this season, they had 2 running backs with more rushing yards than Josh Allen. And if that's not the first time, it's maybe just the second. 23 carries between Devin Singletary and James Cook, each with a TD. Josh Allen was not having a day passing, but he still tossed 2 touchdowns and rushed for 1. If Allen can play bad for Allen and still produce 3 touchdowns while also getting over 200 rushing yards from his backs, hell, just a $150 in the playoffs from the backs will go a long way, and I don't know who will stop the Bills besides themselves or any coin minted within the last 10 years. Best play? I'm going to give the best play to a kicker, Greg Joseph, who absolutely bombed this 61-yarder right down the gooch to defeat the Giants. This is now the second week in a row that Joseph has won the game for the Vikes on a buzzer beater. I can't wait to see how he fucks it up in the playoffs. Or God forbid, the Super Bowl against the Bills, where both kickers just keep shanking chip shots. This game also had my best catch, going to TJ Hawkinson with his second TD grab. This is why you trade for a guy like Hawk. And Minnesota may not be as smooth as a shirtless Kirk Cousins, but if you do see your Cousins shirtless, you'll probably feel the same way you do when watching the Vikings. Confused. Maybe aroused, but very confused. Worst play? Well, that's going to Mac Jones for his low block on this touchdown return by the Bengals. Just unnecessary here, McCorkle. And McCorkle's got a bit of a history when it comes to dirty plays, and the league let him know by fining him $11,000. Oh, I forgot to mention the real worst play in this game. It was a fumble in the red zone by the Patriots. The Patriots lose another game on a mistake made by Ramondre Stevenson at the very end of the battle. Cincy nearly blew this one, but are still sitting pretty in the playoff standings. Best stat, as Gary Myers pointed out on Twitter, if Sam Darnold wins out, he'll beat out Tom Brady for the division, just like the Jets thought he would when they drafted him number 3 overall. Best game? Well, it was Cowboys-Eagles, but we covered that. Packers-Dolphins was close, but that's marred by a concussion, an undiagnosed concussion, so I'll hand out 2 worst finishes instead today. Congratulations, Arizona, you had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the ropes with Trace McSorley. Brady had 2 picks on the day. He was playing like garbage, and he was playing poorly while your defense notched 0 sacks on him. But with less than 5 minutes left in the game, a 3-point lead, Trace McSorley tossed one of the worst pitches I've ever seen this season. Arizona fumbles and gives Brady and company the ball back. His luck is undefeated. His former team fumbling away games as he currently just receives fumbles to win games. You can't teach that. Tom's so washed though. He couldn't even win this game in regulation with that gift. Tampa had to settle for a 42-yard field goal to tie it up. And with 2 straight possessions following that, Arizona could not manage any points and lost in OT. This game was so bad, J.J. Watt announced he was retiring after this season ends. Congratulations, Arizona. You're more harmful to J.J. Watt than his heart condition. Worst finish, also going to Tua and the Dolphins. Tua's 3 second-half interceptions were, at the time, unforgivable. But this week's worst moment came after the game when we learned yesterday that Tua is back in concussion protocol. So it means he suffered another concussion and the Dolphins did not notice. Probably makes Tua the best quarterback at hiding concussion symptoms. Honestly, now that we found out he was concussed in this game, it makes a lot of his decisions make more sense, because in that second half, he was just throwing the ball up for grabs late, and it cost the Dolphins in this game. Miami's got the Patriots this week, and now they may have to play without Tua, and we know that that's not worked for the Dolphins this season. And with this being the 3rd concussion for Tua, it might be time to sit him for the rest of the year, regardless of how hot the playoff race is for Miami. And finally, my worst use of rock-hard nipples goes to the Seattle Seahawks, who lost their game before it even started as they warmed up half naked. Those nipples could indeed cut through glass, but they could not cut through a solid Andy Reid game plan. The Chiefs' offense didn't even play that well. Well, for them anyway, and they still owned the Birds, a 14-point victory in a game that Mahomes only threw for 224, and they totaled just 77 rushing yards. The Seahawks have lost 3 in a row. They have lost 5 of their last 6, but Pete Carroll, that wily son of a bitch, keeps winning because Russell Wilson and the Broncos are playing so poorly. He really turned that trade into a win-win-win-win-win-win no matter what the fuck happened situation for himself, didn't he? Yeah, and I'm bitter about it, but what can you do? Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Don't forget to check out the new worst game ever, the Nathaniel Hackett firing video. It's been a busy couple days, and that's why this video was late. My apologies.